Good afternoon. I'm Dara Bunjon. I am the food enthusiast here at J Moore Living. I'm a food writer, food stylist, PR maven, and a frustrated baker. Those of you joining us live, drop your comments and questions for my guest or myself into the comment box, and you will see me check from time to time. Today's guest is Canadian chef, TV host, and author Dennis Prescott, aka Dennis the Prescott, a world traveler, let's see if the math works this week, musician turned chef. Inspired by British chef Jamie Oliver, he lost 90 pounds in the process. In 2017, he authored his first cookbook, Eat Delicious, that became a bestseller. Recognized for hosting the Netflix series Restaurants on the Edge and appearances on the History Channel, The Food That Built America. His latest cookbook, Cook with Confidence, over 100 inspiring recipes to cook and eat together, hits the shelves September 24th. Let's bring in Dennis Prescott.
How are you?
I'm doing great. I am excited to have you on the show. And we have like 2 minutes to talk before going live. And just to tell people, there's so much that when I was trying to find out what my questions are going to be, everything I went into was a deeper rabbit hole. There's so much to learn about you that I hope that I do you justice today. And I always like to ask initially, what's on your plate today other than doing the show?
Yeah, firstly, thank you for deep diving. Hopefully, it wasn't too deep of a dive, and you were able to climb out of that well and find your way here. But firstly, I'll say thank you for having me on the show. It's lovely to connect. It's lovely to chat through and have a conversation. It's interesting to relive your journey and kind of hear what you've done over the past however many years. It feels like a blip. But it also feels like a long time, if that makes sense. When you kind of go through 2017 till now, that feels like yesterday, and I know it wasn't. What's on my plate today? I just flew in from Seattle, so I was in Seattle there and back. I'm now back on the east coast of Canada. I was there for about 7 hours. So I am about as jacked up on coffee as a human being can be. I've got the high test coffee into me today, catching up on emails, going to cook some shrimp this afternoon. But we're having a good day.
So, anything we should know about in Seattle, or is that secret at this point?
No, I'm grateful that, life has kind of taken me from a career wise in many different directions. A lot you mentioned. I work also kind of behind the scenes on the hospitality side of things. Really, some of it front facing, where it's becoming an ambassador on behalf of that company or working to promote what they're doing, and a lot of it is behind the scenes as well, helping to activate better food systems and better food programs from a hospitality side of things. So there's an airline that I'm working alongside that they had a terminal opening, so I was fortunate to be there for that and kind of curate the menu for some work that we're going to be doing down the road.
That sounds fabulous. And you said jacked up on coffee. Well, you are a coffee aficionado. Aren't you a coffee freak?
I'm obsessed. Yes, yes. I mean, there are folks who are significantly more educated than I am, of course, and they're the expert in this space. I'm more of an amateur, but at the same time obsessed, kind of with all things coffee, and have had the good fortune of visiting coffee farms in places like Ethiopia and Kenya and Rwanda, and that experience made me really fall in love with not just the cup of coffee that we drink in the morning, but also the process, the farming, everything that goes into the drying of those beans. I'm very fascinated by the whole world.
Well, a lot of your travel was through World Vision and Chef's Manifesto. Could you tell people more about that?
Sure. A number of years ago, a friend, now colleague, sent me a note and he said, "Hey, I'd like you to come to Kenya and Somalia." I said, "Why?" He said, "Well, we're going to go do a trip And because to me, I'd never been, I'd traveled a bit, especially when I was a musician. I traveled all over North America, a little bit into Europe, um, but hadn't done much global travel outside of that. And he said, you should come. I think it'd be really good for you. We're going to, learn about food systems, learn about global food systems, or what actually happens outside of your own backyard. So I went, and I think that folks often will say this changed my life. Maybe it did, maybe it didn't. This really did change my life to the point where it changed the entire trajectory of not just my career, but also how I view food, how I view the communal table, really how I view, from a very Canadian East Coast, rose-colored glasses, glass half full side of things. Really, how I view, those precious moments at the table where we value the extra hour that we spend, because they do that globally. The challenge, of course, is that they don't necessarily have the food access that we do. East Africa has been suffering from a drought for many years. Got to go to Kenya, experience that firsthand, cook with people, learn from them. It was basically a learning trip for me. But I left changed. I rewrote many of the different kind of points, even recipes in that first cookbook that I had, because I felt like these stories deserved to be told. And then, flash forward, I had the great fortune to be part of a small group of chefs, not for profits, that co-wrote the Chef's Manifesto for the World Food Program for their chefs, for their sustainability action goal Hub 2030, basically just ensuring that chefs have a vehicle to work together globally, to talk about things like food access, sustainability, food equity, farmers, soil health, everything that, from a chef's side of things. There's so much grandfathered knowledge that we have, even just on a food waste side of things. Chefs don't waste food because that's cost. But somebody who's cooking at home might not know how to get everything out of those vegetables, might not know how to get everything in the thing that's in their fridge. And we wanted to create a resource where chefs could be a little more vocal about both what we are doing kind of behind the scenes, but also how we can work together to effectively be part of the conversation in creating a better food system globally. And that didn't really exist before. Of course, now it's grown to a massive organization with, thousands of chefs all over the world getting involved. I was just, very, very fortunate, blessed, and grateful to be part of that kind of core group of folks who created that. So it's a long way of getting at that. Has led me to travel many places all over the world, and experience and cook with some of the most generous, kind, inspiring, lovely folks who have now become friends.
Right. I think in my dive that someone had asked you, I think, your favorite restaurant or favorite food, and am I correct? Nairobi, was it Restaurant Talisman?
I love that restaurant. Yeah, it's a funny thing. I chatted with someone yesterday, and they said, "What's your favorite dish to cook?" And I said, "That's an impossible question." I don't, I don't
Right.
know. I think that's hard for everyone, let alone for someone who works in food. Naming a favorite restaurant, again, it's also extremely difficult. But there is a restaurant in Nairobi, in Kenya. I've been many, many times. You can sit inside, but most of it's open air or kind of indoor outdoor space. Lovely. Food is great. People are beautiful. And I just have very fond memories. My first, second, third trip over, kind of having debriefs there, meeting great friends there. Yeah, it's a lovely space.
Let me go back. I like to do a little bit of background. So you're from Eastern Canada, New Brunswick. You're living in Moncton now or close to Moncton?
Just outside. Yeah.
Okay. And just give people perspective because geography was not my best subject and didn't do well in Trivial Pursuit. But let me tell people where New Brunswick is. It's just north of Maine. It's close to Nova Scotia and Prince Edward's Island and the Bay of Fundy. How'd I
Mm,
do?
perfect. Actually.
Perfect.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
So tell me about growing up. What was your family table like?
Yeah, I mean, the 30,000 foot context of kind of where I grew up. I'm sure that folks who are listening who may have had the good fortune of visiting Maine, which is one of my very favorite places in the United States. outside of Portland, Bangor, and a couple other places, Maine is pretty sparse, beautiful, absolutely beautiful, but not an overly populated state. That's for sure. There's a lot of outdoors,
Right.
oceanfront communities. New Brunswick is not dissimilar, but we don't have a Portland. We don't have kind of a major city. This major city that I grew up in, that I currently live outside of, is the biggest city in our area, and there's something like 120,000 people that live here. Um, so it's more of a kind of remote part of the world, for lack of a better. At the same time, the great thing that comes with that is we have access to nature. We're very close to the Acadian shores, which has some of the cleanest, purest, coldest waters on planet Earth, very high salinity. So we create, farm and fish some of the best cold water shellfish on planet Earth. So growing up, you certainly take for granted what's in your own backyard. I don't think any of us want to, but it's human nature to not recognize that. It took me moving away and living in Nashville to fully realize that. And kind of growing up, we grew up in lobster country. We export the lion's share, global share of lobster, more than any other province, more than any other state. So it is, it's huge. Industry here, but at the same time, it's we celebrate it on the family table consistently. It also, because it comes from our own backyard, it's special, and I'm not nowhere downgrading it, but it's not the premium cost that it would be elsewhere. So we took that for granted. We had lobster many times over the year, and didn't realize that was a very expensive protein everywhere else. I mean, to the point where I have a lobster tattoo. It comes by me very honestly. Growing up, my mom has been a vegetarian my entire life.
Really?
My
Okay.
dad is a stereotypical grew up on a farm, meat and potatoes kind of person. And my mom's been a vegetarian since she was pregnant with my brother almost 40 years ago. So I spent most of my kind of childhood, I lived between a vegetarian diet, with my dad sneaking us off to get a burger on a Friday night when my mom was out with friends or something like that. And obviously that was a vegetarian kind of table before there was the options and the awareness and the education that there is nowadays. We Food for me, I didn't cook a single thing until I moved to Nashville. I was a full time musician there for a while. Started cooking there, but really, I was a freegan. It was kind of, especially the musician's lifestyle. It was whatever was available. We were kind of eating. Had a great experience. That was from kind of high school on, but from an early childhood, it was a lot of seafood. A lot of vegetarian dishes, and then, like I say, the odd burger when my dad would sneak us out.
Yeah. Well, I read somewhere that at a young age you were shucking oysters.
That's true. Yeah, yeah. It's again something we all up and down the Acadian shores of the province of New Brunswick. There are world class oyster farms, and we farm millions of oysters every single year. Beautiful, delicious, super salty, which I love. It tastes just like the sea.
Right.
Um, and But yeah, as a young little lad running around in this part of the world, you take for granted that's not really a normal thing. But
No.
I was very very young with oyster knife in hand for sure.
It's in what you grow up with, just to relate. Um, in Baltimore, where we are, Chesapeake Bay, steamed crabs. You know,
Mm.
your lobster up there, steamed crabs here. And people would stop my mother because at age 5, I was cleaning my own crabs and eating it. 4 or 5 years. They said, "You want to eat it? You learn to clean it." And that was it. We were lucky to have, certain things in our area. Um, but you talked about a musician, and the moment when you decided to get into cooking, it was Jamie Oliver's cookbook from the library because you couldn't afford being the struggling musician. And you took out 3 books. Do you remember, were they all Jamie Oliver or just one was Jamie Oliver?
No, they all were. It's funny. I had a conversation with a friend, fellow musician. He said, I mean, you mentioned it in the intro. The musician's lifestyle is rich in creativity. It's rich in experience. You meet some of your lifelong friends that you really, you feel like you're going to war. Almost, it's the closest thing I'd ever
Right.
experienced to being on a on a sports team or something like that. You feel like it's us against the world. Um, it is amazing. I don't need to say this. The one thing it's not rich in is actual money, and you're definitely living dollar menu to dollar menu, and yeah, I that's no matter what your kind of path in life, it's not a sustainable one in the long run. Also, eating at about 3 in the morning, that kind of thing, most nights after gigs. So, it's a very long way of saying I unintentionally was not taking care of myself, and I definitely needed a change. And at the suggestion of a friend, he said, he kind of had a sit down moment with me, almost, half intervention style, but said,
Right.
you need to start taking care of yourself. I said, well, what does that mean? He said, you need to learn how to cook or you need to eat better. At that point, I mean, YouTube was brand new. Obviously, blogs existed, but it wasn't the culture of access that the internet is today.
Today.
So I didn't really know what my next step is. And he said, you go to the library and borrow some cookbooks. And I very vividly remember looking at him and saying, you're crazy. The library does not have cookbooks. They have many. They have an entire my cookbooks are there now. There's an entire section. But that was, just I had never gone. Went and got my first library card since university. Took out 3 books. They were all Jamie Oliver books. I remember looking at them and just thinking, the guy on the cover seems very happy, approachable. The dishes seemed, I leafed through them at the library and recognized. Yeah, I'd been to England with the band. I made a record, and I recognized a bunch of the curries that he had in there because I tried them at different restaurants. Recipes seemed a little bit more approachable. And again, he just seemed like a super happy guy on the cover. And I kind of gravitated towards that. And I remember making a dish. I made the very first dish I made was a chicken korma dish um, from one of his books. I remembered eating that dish on the pier or close to the pier in Brighton, England, when I was over there making that record. There was about 20 people that we invited from the studio, audio engineers, musicians, whoever, in a sublet apartment in Brentwood, Tennessee. We put a bunch of different camping tables together with camping chairs, the ones that have the beer koozies on the side that you can put
Right.
in them. Very makeshift. Made this chicken korma dish. I batched it. This is the first time I ever cooked for anyone. And I invited 20 people. And I
Something I
remember
would do too.
yeah, I don't necessarily recommend that, to be honest. A little high stress moment, but I do remember it getting. I made the dish. Now, to be fair, in full transparency, a lot of these musicians were eating alfaghetti cold out of the can at the studio, so they were just happy for a hot meal. But I remember serving the food and everyone tucking in, taking their first bite, and it could get quiet just for a second, and then it got a little bit louder, and then people started to have fun. I didn't realize that you could create these beautiful moments at the table, um, where creativity and the I guess that output, that artistic output that happened. I didn't realize that you could create those moments of connection with anything but music because it's all I'd ever done. Obviously I now know that there's many different creative paths that you can go down to, that you can create that beautiful connection with folks, but it's the only thing that I had done outside of music, like playing somebody's favorite love song or something that reminded them of being in high school, whatever it was.
Right.
I saw that every time I got on stage, but I felt it at the table that time. And I've said for years, I don't think that anyone falls in love with cooking. I think that everyone, whether you're a 3 Michelin star chef or a great home cook, you fall in love with feeding people. And then as a
Abs-
byproduct of that, you fall in love with cooking. And I think for me, taking those books, recreating that recipe that I had a connection point with that I knew I already loved. So for me, it was fun because I knew I was creating a dish that I had fallen in love with, that I had this nostalgic memory of, making that for other people and seeing them react that way, that it was, game over for me. That was all I wanted to do.
Well, I think I can go so many directions right now, but your first cookbook was Eat Delicious 125 Recipes for a Daily Dose of Awesome. You have the new cookbook, Cook with Confidence, 100 Inspiring Recipes to Cook and Eat Together.
Mm.
Is that the difference between Cookbook 1 and Cookbook 2 is more bringing people to the table? Where are the differences, or what did you do? What can people expect in your new book?
Yeah, I think that there's a few things. I think there's a natural progression on a personal level. I have had so many incredible experiences since that first book came out in 2017 that I certainly don't take for granted. But I mean, even making the Netflix show, traveling literally all over the planet with that show, with other projects, with the Chef's Manifesto project that we talked about, I've cooked and eaten with hundreds of people, and the one thing that rings true is that everyone loves food. Everyone has a favorite dish, and everyone loves serving that favorite dish to people they love. It doesn't matter whether you're in Kenya or Ethiopia or Cambodia or Canada or Maine or Baltimore. We all share that. We all have this beautiful connection around food. And I think a lot of folks are nervous, and there's a stress-driven kind of culture that's been created around food, especially when we're feeding other people. We're nervous because we invite friends over on Friday night. We're nervous on Wednesday. Well, are they going to like my food? What am I going to make? What am I going to serve as a starter? What am I? And for me, I just recognize that food should be community. Food is about the gathering of people at the table. It's not so much about the food. Of course, we want the food to be delicious, but it's those moments, those precious moments that we spend at the table that we remember. I think great food can help usher in those moments. And for me, I want to show people Oz. I want to take the veil off of a lot of the things that might freak people out, or be a stopgap, and like opening an oyster, like pin boning a fish, like doing things like this that are not difficult once you know, but if you don't know, they seem scary. And I wanted to show, both all of those techniques, tricks, tips that I've learned from chefs that I've cooked alongside, places I've cooked in, and folks I've cooked with. But I also wanted to share beautiful stories of the folks that I learned those from. And that could have been, a mom that I cooked with in Zakunzi in the south of Kenya. It could be my friend Arthur, who's an amazing chef that I cook with a lot in London at his restaurant. Whoever it is, I wanted to tell their story, because at the end of the day, the stories, food is story a lot. It is community, but it's story, it's nostalgia, it's memory. And I think that it's rich when you do tell the story, the origin story of where those dishes come from. So for me, I wanted to create a book that helps inspire folks in the kitchen, that makes food less stressful, that makes food fun, dishes that taste delicious, that are beautiful, that you're really proud to present to people, but also that the story behind that dish and where I was inspired. At the end of the day, these recipes often, they're not my recipes. It might be my interpretation. It might be how I've taken a spin on that specific
Right.
dish. But at the end of the day, that dish is somebody else's. I had just had the good fortune to cook us alongside them and learn from them. And I think it's important to tell tell the full journey of that story.
Um, you in every piece of media, you talk about that aha moment when you start cooking from Jamie Oliver's cookbook. Have you
Mm.
ever heard from him?
So it's interesting. You're right, I do, and it's not intentional. It's just it literally changed my life. So it's hard not to share. It's funny. I think it's easy to kind of downgrade moments in your life that are pivotal and that are kind of banner moments. So I try to remind people of that, because I think that we all have those moments. We all have moments that we come to a place where something is very impactful, to the point where we almost do a 180 or a U-turn on things in our life. And for me, creative side of things, I think it's worth, leaning into. So I want to inspire folks that, like, you can find that pivot moment too. You can find your aha moment at the table too, whatever that looks like.
Mhm.
I had the good fortune in my first book of sharing a publisher with Jamie, and we we don't know each other, in the sense that we're friends. Lovely person, but I did meet him a couple times at events. I find him, goes without saying, but what he's done, what he's done in making food accessible, fun, and beautiful for millions of folks around the world is very admirable. And I'll forever give him his flowers for creating not just the business that he has, but the fun culture of food, both in the UK and elsewhere. Where the table has become more accessible for a lot of folks. And I think at the end of the day, we love going to beautiful restaurants. We love tasting amazing food. We love being inspired by chefs that are doing very creative and exciting things. But most of us are eating most of our food at home. And why shouldn't that also be delicious? And why shouldn't that also be inspiring? So I think he's done a great job in creating a series of cookbooks that not just inspired me, but millions of other people.
Well, hopefully somebody out there is going to look at Eat Delicious and cook with confidence and be inspired to go forward like you were. Isn't that a
Agreed.
wonderful
Yeah.
thought? Yes.
The,
Um,
the yeah, I was just sorry. I just said it's literally my favorite of anything that I do, and it's daily will receive many messages from folks, photos of food that they've had at their dish, photos of their family eating a dish, photos of the cookbooks.
Wonderful.
What an honor, to join people, because at the end of the day, that recipe becomes part of somebody's family repertoire, and of course they probably make it theirs. They might change something, they might adapt it, but I get to join them on at least a small level at their family table. That's an honor.
Right. So, Instagram, just to let people know, we said that Dennis is known as Dennis the Prescott, Dennis the Prescott website, Dennis the Prescott Facebook, Dennis the Prescott Instagram, probably other ones, but those are the ones that I put through and tell people about because they're easily accessible. The Instagram,
Hmm.
854,000 followers. I told you I went down a rabbit hole. I know the first food or beverage that you put on Instagram. Do you remember?
I don't rem- I remember looking. This is a couple years ago. I remember scrolling back. Remember that time a few years ago that we had a lot more time spent in the house? I had a lot of
Unfortunately,
time on my
yes.
hands. So I remember scrolling back. I remember looking at it thinking, I can't tell what this is, or I could barely tell what this is. Uh, yeah.
Well, I looked at it and you can tell it was early on because you didn't have that upgraded camera at that point. It was either a cappuccino or a latte.
Oh, wow.
And
Yeah,
it
you're
was
right, actually.
January 22nd, 2012.
Hmm.
Told you I went down a rabbit hole. We have a question here. Now that you're expressing love for others through food, have you been able to express yourself that way with music once again?
Not yet, to be honest. It's interesting when I left, without kind of going down too far of a rabbit hole. When I left, because I'll let you do that. When I left music, I, I all I thought was I was going to be a musician my whole life. There was no backup plan. There was no, I'll do this on the side. I'm very much an all or nothing person, and I dive full into something. So when I left, I almost needed, there's a better word than this, but I needed to almost divorce myself from that time in my life and mourn I'm going into something new. I certainly could not be more grateful for where my career and my life has gone, but I never planned on it being here. So I didn't know what this was going to be, this next phase of my life outside of music. I just knew I couldn't do music anymore, which is to say I didn't pick up a guitar for a very long time. I
Really?
almost needed to have a break from it. And now, because it was work for me, every time I picked up a guitar, I was just thinking about writing a hit song, about how do you progress, how do you get more people to see what you're doing. I needed it to become fun again, and only fun, with no agenda. And then over the past little bit, I finally kind of um, found my peace, I guess, with that. And I've been able, for music now, it is just fun. There's no agenda. There's no idea of, oh, I have to write this song for this artist because that's all gone for me. And now it's just, it reminds me of being in 15, and playing music with my friends. And so to me, I've now found that joy in music again, which I'm very grateful for. I think the best creativity happens out of pure passion and love. And
Absolutely.
it's nice to for the U-turn to have happened with music.
Right. I want to tell people that your Instagram and the photos, if you eat with your eyes, I look at the Instagram, the photos are insane, gorgeous setup. It isn't just
Thank you.
a thing, it's styled, it's visual. If you eat with your eyes, after looking at the page, I'd weigh 3 tons. I mean, it's just stunning. And you can tell the passion by what you're putting there. Now, I don't know how many people it takes to do all the videos and things that you're doing, because it can't, if you're doing all of it, congratulations. But are you doing all who's doing, when I sit there and I see a tabletop filled with food and you do
Mm.
a lot of overhead shots, I can't do anything without talking with my hands.
You and
Are
me
you
both.
the only one? Do you have an
Yeah.
assistant? What's going
No,
on?
it's just me. Of course,
Wow.
I have a great team, and they do many things. But they're for the most part all based in New York, and the as we talked about before, where I grew up and now where I found myself back home after many years of being away. The benefit of being here, because we are very remote, it takes me an extra one, if not two flights to get everywhere that I need to go. There are certain challenges. The benefit, and initially the challenge was I was cooking. I wasn't a photographer. I wasn't a videographer. I was a cook, who became a chef who's cooked many different places, but I had no idea how to use a camera. I had no idea how to make video. Um, I also live in a part of the world where we don't have many photographers and videographers and folks who do that professionally. Of course, that has changed over the past few years, but when I started, there was really no one doing that, so I kind of had to figure it out on my own. So it was very unintentional, and it's been the nice thing now is because I'm able to do that. I still, even now, if I shoot video content, whether that's for a brand or for what, if it's in my space, I do it. I like to be able to have the full creative kind of freedom of seeing that. And the great thing is I think about dishes from a flavor perspective first. Obviously, I want it to taste great. I want it to be great for your family. I want you to be able to pull it off. If you're spending hard-earned money on ingredients, I want you to be set up for success. So it's all
Right.
flavor led. At the same time, I'm able to, while I'm creating that dish, think about the creative of how does it going to look on the page? If it's going in a book, what's the image going to look like? If it's going in a video, how am I going to style this, and how am I going to film this so it looks beautiful? So I'm able to kind of scratch many different creative itches as I create these recipes. Never intended on that being the case, but it's been a lovely kind of journey, and a nice little added bonus that it's kind of forced that out of me by being where I am.
Okay. Um, I want to just get to the Netflix and we'll talk about Restaurant on the Verge and then we'll come down to my questions.
Mm.
I feel like we could chat for a long time, but you have things to do and I can go on and on. So, Netflix,
Mm.
one of the co hosts of Restaurant on the Verge, 2 seasons. Please tell the people what Restaurant on the Verge is, should they not have Netflix and have not seen it.
Sure. So, interesting backstory that I'll give you. Very quick kind of cliff notes because it's interesting, and we're chatting through all of the ins and outs. I don't think anybody thinks, even in the biggest moonshot, even in the biggest bucket list dream, I don't think anyone thinks I'm gonna get a Netflix show. It's pretty out there. Could not be more grateful, but I never planned on that. And interestingly enough, I had a DM on Instagram, before we kind of started production on that. Would you be interested in potentially having a conversation about this show? I thought it was spam for sure. I thought there's no way that this is a real message that's coming to me on Instagram. Turns out very real. Was able to kind of film that show. The point of the show. restaurants on the edge is both very specific and also it's literal and not literal in the sense that there is a country will travel all over the world. Every single episode is shot for the most part. Aside, there's a couple in Canada, but for the most part, restaurants are shot in a different country. They are in the most beautiful place possible. You couldn't find a more beautiful place. Often with those beautiful places, well, what happens? There's a restaurant because they know tourists are going to go there and they're going to eat great food, or they're going to eat food. Sorry. Typically, that food is, or at least the menu is designed for Americans or Canadians or Europeans. It's not designed locally, and all we want to do. I'm not sure if you feel this, but I would say probably most of your audience, and certainly if I go to Costa Rica, if I go to Mexico, if I go to Slovenia, if I go to Hong Kong, I want to eat local flavors, local food,
Right.
inspiring local dishes. The last thing I want to eat is chicken fingers or a burger or fries. I don't want to. I can eat that at home,
Right.
but that often these menus are designed that way because they feel like that's what we want. So, my goal on the show, as the chef host on the show, is to help not only inspire the restaurant owners and the chef that the flavors that they have in their own backyard are more affordable, they're locally available, they taste incredible, and that's what folks want to eat. But it's also to tell a story of the local farmers, fishermen, producers, providers, people in that area, help to elevate them, elevate their story, give them the microphone that they deserve, and really get out of the way of the story. I'm a vehicle on behalf of the viewer to try to answer and ask great questions, to hear from people, and to tell this beautiful story of local flavors. Hopefully, and at the end of the day, the goal of this, of course, restaurant is on the edge of this, beautiful place, is also on the edge of closing. So we're there to help them to lead them towards success. And it set them up for success so that they can thrive in the future once we leave. The amazing thing is, because of course our show is all driven through positivity. There's no wagging of fingers and no shouting and nothing like that. It's all just joyful. How do we come alongside and help you? I've been able to kind of stay in contact with many of the folks who had these restaurants who, I ran into the owner from the Malta restaurant at the Boston Seafood Expo this year. Very randomly, we just ran into each other. And he said that he had literal lineups out the door for weeks after that came out, until COVID, of course, happened. And unfortunately, it came out around the same time that season did. But it's been nice that there was real, actual positive benefit outside of just filming a television show. We wanted to really make an impact. And it's been lovely to see that there has been an impact. At the end of the day, the hero of that show is the restaurant owner, and the farmers and fishermen that we get to highlight on the show, outside of course, the design folks and everyone else.
I have to correct myself. For some reason, I put in my notes restaurant on the verge. It's restaurants on the edge. Uh, I love live.
It's the best.
So it's the best. I go through it and I've survived, I think, 211 shows. I'm still here.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I could cover a whole lot more. I'm not, because we need to get to these questions and you have work to do. So the questions at the end of the show: what's the best piece of advice somebody gave you?
Don't say no to anything based on fear.
Okay.
I think the very quick on that too, just to give context, is I think that I think in our lives we say no to a lot of things because we think we're not ready. I'm not there. I'm not ready. I can't do this. I'm not sure. You're never going to get to a place in life where you feel fully ready to do something that seems scary. I think if something's not right, it's not right, and say no to that for sure. But if it's just, because I'll tell you, in my life, I wasn't ready to write my first book. That's for sure. There's no manual on how do you do that. I wasn't ready to make my first television appearance. I wasn't ready to make a full television show. I wasn't ready. But I said yes because I knew that the opportunity made sense. scared me, but it stretched me. It made me a better person. It made me a better cook, a better chef, better creative, and just really was the best possible kind of career choice. But also on a human level, I think that it's opened doors that I never imagined. So say yes to things that might scare you, but are also right for you.
Well, I personally believe a lot of people, and myself included, sometimes we don't do things for fear of the success, not fear of the failure. What am I going to
Sure,
do if this goes this way or that way? I think
sure.
somewhere where we talked, you in your cooking, you called it failed forward. It
Yeah,
always took you to the next step.
yeah.
Um, Best bite you've had all week.
Oof. Hmm. I had a creamed corn pasta that was creamed corn tagliatelle at a restaurant called McKiernan in Montreal. Very classic. It literally was, your standard fare: cream corn, crispy bacon, lots of fresh chives, a little tarragon in there, tossed with tagliatelle. It just to me tasted like comfort in a bite.
Okay. 2 must that must be in your refrigerator.
Parmesan cheese and hot sauce.
Okay. I thought maybe I was gonna hear maple syrup because in strumming through some of the things,
Mm, hmm.
I see you use because that's what you grew up on, you tap the trees, maple syrup. It's
Yeah.
just curious.
Yeah, I mean,
Uh,
that would be a third. If you gave me three, it would be the third for sure.
okay, good cover. Your ultimate culinary fail.
The quick version, the very first brand job that I ever did was for a brand that made um, ovens, large electronic appliances. And I went to just outside of Philadelphia. There's a major studio, massive studio, so 25,000 square foot studio space where they makeshift different kitchens for commercial sets. Sink doesn't work. These aren't actually lit up. These aren't. It's all fake, but it works great from a filming side of things. They said I was down there. I was filming something for the new high end range, doing a steak video. Crew was there. There was probably 30 people looking on from a production side of things, TVs, everything. I had never been on a set before. I had never filmed a brand deal before. I'd never done anything. And I put a cast iron pan on the hob to get it really hot. Didn't realize that as you get ready to film, the biggest thing I think that folks who've never been on camera don't realize is there's a lot of hurry up and wait. And you might say, "Hey, we're ready to go." We're actually ready to go in 2 hours, but your call time is now. Which is to say, even on a commercial set, things don't happen in the same timing that you would at home. Put this cast iron pan on, got it really hot. Came back, what I thought was 2 minutes later was probably 25 minutes later. And in front of 35, 40 people, I burnt the life out of the most beautiful ribeye steak that I had ever seen. And I've never felt more embarrassed. And I've also never made that mistake again.
We learn from our errors, don't we?
So
And
we
if we
fail
don't
forward.
learn, yeah, yeah. If you wake up tomorrow with a new talent, what would the new talent be? Now we know you have 2 talents, music and food. So
Hmm.
what would your new talent be?
It's interesting. I have actually thought about this question. I've picked up, this is a very recent thing, but I've picked up golf recently. Golf as an adult, not easy, I got to tell you, but also very addictive. But it would be easy for me to say that because it's become a very new obsession. But I would love to be, you know, I'd love to be able to go back and say I started golfing at about 14 and was at that place. Now I am not. So I would say I'd love to be a great golfer.
Okay. I love these questions. I get to really learn so much more. And the final question, what didn't I ask you that I probably should have?
I mean, I feel like we covered a lot. The only thing that I would say is, if folks are just thinking about the cookbook actually comes out in 2 weeks, 2 weeks from yesterday, in the United States. Like we mentioned, cook with confidence. Um, we talked about it from an overview side of things. We talked about the thought process behind it. I think the biggest thing is, I think there are many cookbooks and many resources online. The great thing, you were very kind to talk about the photographs. The nice thing about this book, as you'll see, if you pre-order it or if you're able to pick it up in the store, is that I wanted to include a photograph for every single dish in the book. I think we eat visually, we learn visually. We're a very visually driven culture, and I'm a very visually driven person, which is why I've kind of gravitated towards the photography and the videography side of things. And I think there's a lot of folks like me, and who don't just want to read the words on a page, although they are incredibly valuable, is they want to see the picture associated with that dish. So I included a photograph that's high res that I was able to make for every single dish throughout the book, so that it's a very visually driven book. I know for sure that you're going to find recipes that will become kind of permanent weekly meal plan dishes for your family. And the cool thing is, then you can adapt them. The other thing that I'll mention very quickly is, I wanted to, like I had mentioned, I wanted to show people Oz, and take the veil off some of these more challenging things that can be a little more approachable with some time. I also wanted to include so many different alternatives for a lot of the recipes. So, there's instructions on how to create this on a grill. There's also instructions on how to do this on an oven. There's also instructions on how to do this on, an electric cooktop. So there's really no gap, whether you live in a high-rise building in New York City, or if you have a lot of property, in middle America, and you can have that beautiful grill in your backyard, you can still create every single dish from the book. So end of the day, we wanted to really help set people up for success. And it's been a very cool journey to go on. So I'm excited about the next few weeks.
Well, all I can say is I got to look at the PDF of the book. The book's not out yet. And just, Dennis the Prescott. Go to his website. I'll tell you where you can purchase the book, or go to your favorite
Mm.
bookseller. You can pre-order it now. That's available. So, and follow that Instagram. I'm telling you, gorgeous. We got to take him to a
That's right.
million
Yeah, I appreciate
followers.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, what a fun journey. It's so fun. I mean, it's a funny thing. I think that a lot of times folks think about social as just social, and it is. I gotta tell you though, and I'm sure you experienced this doing what you do, but the food community to me is the best online community that there is. It's encouraging, it's exciting. Folks just want to connect with people centered around great food and community, and more time spent at the table. So to me, it's just such a joy. I view myself as being almost the moderator of a forum. Maybe I'm creating the content, but I'm just part of the conversation. The folks who follow me, I want to help set them up for success. I really believe in it. So it's a real honor when people connect with what I do online, because at the end of the day, I'm not making it for me, I'm making it for them.
Right. And not that I entertain that much, but when I do, my joy is having people at the table,
Mm.
sometimes strangers, and leaving as friends.
That-
That's what
that's
it's
the
about.
best.
That's the best.
Yeah.
Dennis, thank you so much. Continued success. Um, I take it, I don't know, are we ever going to see Restaurants on the Edge again, or is that a wrap, or what's
We'll
next?
see. We have a few projects that I can't fully talk about right now that are in the pipeline. That I know that if you are a fan of that project, you are absolutely going to love. Come back to us. What you and I can reconnect once I'm more able to chat about that for sure. But yeah, a lot of great stories around travel, exploring, learning new ingredients, me trying not to get in harm's way along the way, diving or climbing, and it'll be really fun.
Great. All the best. Thank you so much for sharing all
Thank
your
you.
time. Have a great day. And everyone, we're just going to talk about next week's guest, and who's a musician. So you should tune
Oh,
in, Dennis.
I will.
We'll see where Griffin is. He's supposed to take you out. Griffin. All right. Well, you can listen who's going to be on the show. Next week's guest is Shirley Hale, a chef, cafe owner, Baltimore's Baby on Fire Cafe and Record Store. Food stylist for Netflix, HBO, and Paramount Plus shows like the recent series Lady in the Lake, as well as House of Cards and We Own the City. A lifelong touring musician fronting a myriad of indie rock bands over 35 years. A recent transplant to Portugal, she and her husband still manage the Stateside Cafe and run an internet radio station called Radio Plastique. So Cheryl, I can't wait for her to be on the show and deep dive Cheryl as I just did Dennis. Always feel free to reach out to me via my email, which is food@jmoreliving.com, or at Dara Cooks on Instagram or on Facebook. I have a Facebook page called the Food Enthusiast. You can sign up at jmoreliving.com for a free This Week in Baltimore Eating newsletter. Click on the Connect on the website menu to sign up. So the menu at the top of J More Living's website, they have a Connect menu. Click on that and you can click up for the free newsletter about food that comes out weekly. All shows are immediately archived in video form on J More Living's Facebook page and jmoreliving.com. We truly appreciate it when you share our show with friends and family. Feel free to go back into our archives and enjoy past shows. May your plates always, always remain full, and I look forward to seeing you next Thursday.